On today's show, we have an incredible guest joining us, someone whose heart for worship and passion for equipping leaders shines through everything that she does. We're so excited to welcome Andrea Olson to the podcast. Andrea is not only a gifted worship leader and songwriter, but she's also the founder of Overflow Worship, a ministry that's mentored over 3,000 worship leaders through conferences, coaching, and online resources. She has shared the stage with artists like Meredith Andrews, Christy Knuckles, and Shane, just to name a few. And she's also an author, pouring faith-filled truths into families through the Big God books. Is there anything else I missed?
No, thanks for having me. It's always a little bit like a little strange when I sit here and like someone reads my bio. I'm just me, Here I am, and I'm grateful to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, we like to do some digging on social media for people that we are going to have on the show. And we saw a few weeks ago that you have a podcast as well, and you interviewed Andy Chrisman from For Him. For Him is one of our favorite all-time 90s groups.
Yes.
And when we started this show 4 years ago, he was one of our first guests that we had on, and he's a legend. And what is your favorite For Him song?
Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, I love For Him too, by the way. And Mark Harris is a good friend of ours as well. So it's like if the 90s Andrea knew, she would be like, no way. But I would say, okay, do you remember the album The Ride?
Well, yeah. I had the tape.
Right? The tape. I love it.
What's that, Dad?
What's that? Yeah, I know. My kids don't know either. I mean, I loved that album. I liked that song. I know that's a little bit like cheesy to say maybe,
roller
but
coaster sound.
yeah, and I think part of it too is that I went to a music camp in Minnesota, and it was called Music Minnesota, and they would do musicals for all ages, and they did like a For Him musical one summer, and it was based on that song.
Wow.
So, I mean, that's just one that sticks out, but goodness, there's so many. What's your favorite one?
I love the album The Message.
Yeah.
That album is amazing. And of course, Basics of Life. Their Christmas album is awesome. It's a shame they only did one, but yeah, there's a lot I like. And I love Andy's a phenomenal worship leader, and like you said, Mark is doing some great things at Gateway. Yes, they are all doing some amazing things. In fact, they were on the K-Love cruise recently doing like a throwback night that looked pretty sweet. And so
that's awesome.
Yeah. Well, Andrea, won't you tell our viewers and our listeners a little bit about yourself and what you do and what everything about Overflow Worship?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So, Overflow Worship, man, it's been a journey. It's been 10 years actually since I started Overflow, and it was born out of a passion in my heart for the local church and being a worship leader in a small local church, and all of the challenges that we faced as growing a team and building things from scratch and from the ground up, and having to get kind of scrappy with resources and limited budgets. I realized on my journey that I can't be alone, right? There's got to be more people out there that feel the same way. And of course there are. And so as I grew in my journey as a worship leader, I began to reach out to other worship leaders in my area and just connect with them and collaborate with them, build community. And what happened was we began to just develop this really sweet community together. And I realized that there was something more that I could do. And so I began offering help, training, just whatever I could to support the other worship leaders in our area. And I began training the youth and the students, both in our church and helping other churches do the same to raise up the next generation. And in 2014, I had my very first Overflow Worship Conference, which is kind of how Overflow was born. And since then, it has grown into just a beautiful online community of worship leaders from all over the world who are passionate to grow and passionate to be excellent with what they have where they are. And while we have not done an in-person Overflow Worship Conference for a few years, we have began to really grow our online membership and our courses for worship leaders. And now in 2025, the newest thing that we are doing is we are expanding what Overflow Worship is, because I truly believe that the church of tomorrow depends on the leaders that we develop today. And so we are expanding our lens to support Christian leaders. So we have resources, yes, for worship leaders at Overflow Worship Leaders, but we also have resources for, pastors or Christian business owners, entrepreneurs, and just wanting to really pour my years of entrepreneurship and my years of leadership and ministry back into the upcoming generation so that we can do our best to set the next generation up for success. So that's Overflow Worship in a nutshell.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Will you guys ever do in-person conferences or?
Yeah, we will. It's been a really good pause for us because we had 9 in a row, 9 in 9 years, and it was just so incredible and such a beautiful part of my growth, but also of Overflow Worship and the churches we've developed relationships with and all of that. But it was a necessary pause to figure out what the next piece of our story looks like. And then, we will move to in-person retreats. My hope is to have smaller, more intimate retreats so that we can really go deep and get granular with people and help them, in a smaller setting of, 50 to 100, where we can really help them with what they need where they are.
Yeah. So your all's music, Overflow Worships, um, do you guys, when it comes to like the writing process, do you guys get away for the weekend, or is it just through testimonies and things like that when it comes to writing the music, the songs? Or tell us a little bit about the writing process of your all's
Yeah,
music.
yeah, absolutely. So, you know, Overflow Worship as an organization, the music that is released is actually mine. It's under Andrea Olson. And so, the cool thing is that it's they go together though, right? Because
Yeah.
my heart and passion is to see the church thrive in worship and to um, cultivate and steward the atmosphere of worship in churches. So for me, the writing process has evolved and changed. I feel like when my babies were really little, it was just like pockets of time. But now, yeah, I really feel like I need to get away and focus a few days. I'll fly down to Nashville and just set up different days of co-writes. Co-writing has been so good for me. It's stretched me and strengthened and challenged me as a songwriter. It was kind of scary at first, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
But it's actually, once you're in it, it's such a beautiful thing because we're all bringing our unique giftings to the table. And so I do find that there's something really powerful and necessary about protecting a window of time and like getting your brain in that space and really committing to it. And God does something really amazing in that time.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about leadership. I want to ask you just a few questions about leadership. So, when giving advice to someone stepping into leadership for the first time, whether it may be like a worship pastor, a team leader at a job, or a creative director, just anything like that, what advice would you give them for stepping into a leadership role for the very first time?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, when it comes to stepping into a leadership role, I think the very first thing that I would tell people is it's important that we always approach it with humility and surrender. And for us as followers of Christ, it's so important that we just bring that leadership role to the Lord and we're like, hey, like, thank you for putting me in this leadership role. I'm going to steward it the best that I can. But especially in creative roles and music roles, worship leading, there's always this component of, yes, ownership, which is a good thing, but there's a little bit of like, this is my gift, right? Like this, I honed this thing, I refined it, I worked, I practiced,
Yeah.
whatever. And that's true, but it can become selfish. I can't tell you how many times I've heard different people say like, well, this is my ministry. or this is my only outlet for music. And it's like, okay, that actually is a problem. Like, we need to take a
Yeah.
step back. And so what I tell people, the very first thing is, hey, we need to step into this with humility and surrender. And the second thing I say is we need to set up community and accountability, because within the process, especially in church leadership, but it's no different for any other Christian, a business owner, whatever that looks like, we need accountability and we need community, because just as I said, we can get selfish or we can, get possessive. We need people who will come alongside of us and say, hey, I see this in you. How can I help? Or who can hold us accountable, hold us up, pray for us. And also those mentors who have been where we are. There's this
Mm.
book by Clay Scroggins called The Aspiring Leader's Guide to the Future. It's such a
Yeah.
proper name. Have you read that one?
Mm-mm.
It's
That's a unique title.
I know it is. And the graphic on it is like a spaceship or something. It's kind
Yeah.
of funny, but he's a great writer and a great speaker. But he talks about this concept of, like if you're rafting, which I don't whitewater raft, but I understand the parallel. You want to have someone behind you, beside you, and in front of you, right? People in front of you call out the obstacles, the people beside you cheer you on, and the people behind you are the ones that you call out obstacles for. And so we need that in leadership, especially because it can be very lonely and very isolating. And the last thing I tell them is, look, you have to love Jesus more than anything in this. And that goes with number one, right? With that surrender. But especially in worship leadership, I talk a lot about that, because we can love the platform, the stage, the instrument, the people, the songs, all the things, right? It's a big job with a vast job description, and it's hard and beautiful. But if we don't put Jesus first, eventually we're leading from empty, not overflow, which is where overflow worship came from.
Yeah. Uh, this day and age, leadership, especially in the church, a lot of people get burnt out in ministry, and there's a staggering statistic where, a lot of church leaders, pastors drop out, after just a few years, and just the way people struggle, the way that, uh, church, I guess, people in the congregation, maybe other leaders, will say things and hurt people. And just, I mean, you've been in the ministry long enough to witness and experience these things. What would you say to someone that is struggling as a leader and maybe on the verge of leaving or throwing in the towel, or, things like that?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it is a very big problem right now, especially, and coming off of all that we went through during COVID and all of the challenges that presented for the church. But also now there's a lot of pressure, whether you're a worship leader or a pastor, for the people on the platform to have answers in times of uncertainty. And yes, we have scriptures to look to and everything. Yes. But for a new leader or someone who is either new or they're burnt out and overwhelmed, it's a lot of pressure. And so, first of all, I just feel for you. If you're listening to this, I just want you to know that you're not alone. You're not crazy. You're not a bad person for feeling overwhelmed or near burnout. You are a human being who deserves care and attention. And so that is the first thing that I say to people is, look, we're humans, and we were not designed to carry the weight of the world on our shoulders. We were not meant to, I mean, with all the technology and access that we have to news at all moments, I mean, in our phones, we can pull it out and we could have access to anything we want any time of the day, and people can have access to us too, right? Well, John Eldridge talks about how he's like, I don't think that we were designed to carry all of that. And so we need to be kind to our souls. We need to be kind to ourselves and give ourselves, the permission to say no. Right. And sometimes that means just saying no to that extra thing that somebody asks you to do. But if you're at the verge of like, look, I'm walking away. I'm done. I can't do this anymore. That, that's a bigger a bigger thing, that a bigger conversation to have. But first of all, ask yourself, is there some things that I can say no to? Are there some things that I've said yes to that I'm just like, well, it's good. It's all good because it's ministry. Like, I can do it. Well, I I don't think that that's a good enough reason. And I learned that the hard way. Like, ask me how I know. I learned it the
Yeah.
hard way. And so I would say, first of all, ask yourself that question. Are there some things that I can say no to? Second of all, lean on that community that hopefully you built. And if not, find somebody, right? Find a mentor, talk to your senior pastor or your elder board or your spouse. Find somebody. Don't be an island, because leadership and ministry can be very isolating and we can feel very alone. And I think it's important for us to remember, like, wait a minute, I don't have to do this alone. I think the enemy sometimes wants us to believe that we do have to do it alone. Like, oh, it's a isolating, lonely job. Well, I don't think it's supposed to be. Yes, it is a high calling and it's unique and people might not always understand or relate, but I don't think that we're supposed to do it alone. And so those are some of the things that I would tell somebody who's on the verge. And lastly, man, if there's any way that you can take a sabbatical and put that as a regular rhythm, that's a huge piece of the puzzle of keeping you away from burnout. And it doesn't have to be 6 months. Like, could you take a couple weeks? Like, what's the what's the minimum here of what you could do? Just do something. Because it's so important that my husband and I have a sabbatical house, like that we just have reserved for people, missionaries, pastors, whatever, who need a place to go, but it's expensive, to get away and rent a house
Yeah.
for a month, because it is such a key component in keeping yourself away from burnout. So those are kind of some proactive things you can do, and just some relatability and encouragement of like, hey, you're not alone, and it's okay that you feel this way. Talk to somebody. Don't be alone in it.
Yeah, that is one thing that a lot of people need to learn to say in the ministry is no.
I agree.
It's very liberating once you figure that out. When I'm a pastor, and so I've told my wife several times, people come up with these ideas, ministries, and like, what do you think, pastor? And I'm like, yeah, that's a great idea. Run with it, and they'll
Yeah,
ask me, well, can you head it up? No, I'm not putting that on my plate. You know what I mean?
good for you. Yeah.
Go for it, and so, yeah, learning to say no. That's I've seen a lot of pastors lose families and
Mm,
sons and daughters because they choose their work. At the end of the day, church is is a business. It is a
mhm.
ministry, but it's also
Yep.
a job. And so I've seen a lot of pastors lose their family because they've sacrificed so much. And I'm like, no, you have to put family. You have to put your family before the people in the church.
Yeah.
When I cross that finish line, I want my family with me in heaven, and so,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
so
There's boundaries, right? Like, and I think in ministry, those boundary lines get blurred. I'm sure you've seen that too, where it's like, well, it's all good things, and so we can't use that as a filter. The filter
right,
of, is this good,
sure,
doesn't work, because, you know, like, can you head up this ministry or spearhead this? It's like, well, yeah, I could, but I'm not going to,
right,
because because my filter is, does this like, when I say yes to something, that means I'm saying no to somebody else, and that somebody is usually my family. And
hmm
I got to the point, my husband was a pastor for a lot of years too, where we were like, we're not going to do that. That's not, um we don't believe that our family should suffer and fall apart in the name of, what God has called us to in the ministry. So yeah, I completely agree with you. The boundaries are huge.
yeah. And you might hear my dog in the background because she's going crazy over somebody. But uh, I've seen, I know a lot of worship leaders, and they go through a lot of challenges. Um, every single day. And, the thing that I hear the most from worship leaders is, they always want me to sing, a certain song. Every Sunday they'll come up to me and say, can you sing this song? Can you sing this song? And I hear worship leaders say, man, I feel like a walking iPod. I am not that, and
Yes.
so, and there's challenges they face, like they're not singing enough modern songs. They're not singing enough hymns, this and that. And Billy Graham did an article years and years ago about music in the church. And it was just basically like, you know, um, in our day, it was different style, but it was the same message. And so he was saying to the older folk and the younger generation in like the early 90s that the music is different, but it's still the same message. And so trying to tell people, stop complaining over not hearing enough hymns or not hearing enough modern stuff. It's presented a different way but it's the same exact message. And so, those are some of the things that I hear from worship leaders. But being with Overflow, what are some of the common challenges that you hear from worship leaders?
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with you. Those are some pretty common ones. And the common thread through what you were just talking about is like conflict management and, dealing with those not so fun comments that people make or the things that they say or the pressure that they either intentionally or unintentionally place on you by, for example, requesting a certain song. And so that's definitely something that I hear a lot. And the other one that I hear is how do I grow my team or how do I retain team members? Right.
Mm,
And so that's a big one because I mean, I think it's interesting what I've observed over the last 20 years of being a worship leader and then the 10 years with Overflow Worship overlapping in that is there is a interesting mindset of that if my team like grows in numbers, if that means we're successful or we're good at what we do, which somewhat, if there's a good leader, right, they're going to draw new people. So that's true. But then it becomes a comparison game, right? Of like, well, that church over there sounds, looks, like this, has this equipment, has these resources. So there must be something wrong with us, right? That we haven't hit that yet.
yeah.
And that is such a slippery slope because it can lead to a lot of places, whether it's just sadness and, berating ourselves, or it's just discontentment, right? And that's not a great place to be either, because as worship leaders, I've seen a lot of them with one foot out the door, right? And thinking like, okay, and not always for a bad reason. They're just open to where the Lord would lead them. Yes.
Right.
Um, so I guess with that challenge, I just try to encourage them to focus on being excellent with what they have, where they are, and focusing on pointing everybody at the target of what's your goal, right? And as you grow as a leader, as you develop into yourself, and as you develop this community, what do we want to be known for as a worship leader? Do we want to be known for being crabby and rude? Or do we want to be
Right.
known, for like loving people and empowering them and encouraging them and like laughing and having fun together? Well, that's going to naturally draw new people who want to be a part of what you're doing.
Yeah. I think of another story. A few years back, we went to a conference, and this older pastor, like in his late 70s, had different ages up there, like people his age, and then all the way to like a teenager. And he had the Elvis Presley gospel album up there, and he had it on vinyl, and he had it on 8-track, and he had it on tape and CD, and then an iPod, and then a phone. And then he said, starting from the record, this is an album. This is the Elvis Presley album. And then he went on down. He was like, it's the same exact album, but a different format, all the way up to the iPhone or whatever. And he said the message is the same exact thing,
Mm,
but a different method. And he was talking about worship, in the church. And I was like,
yeah.
man, that is so cool. That's a cool visual. The message is the same. It's just presented in a different way. And so I thought
Yeah.
that's always stuck with me, So
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's so good. I love that analogy and that illustration. I think it makes me think of a conversation I had with Brian Tabor from Worship Probs. I don't know if you know Brian. He's a great guy.
Mm-mm.
Oh, I'll have to introduce you guys. He's a great guy. Worship Probs is the ministry organization he has. He was talking about how, you know, there was a lady in the congregation who came up to him after like an Easter service and was frustrated that they didn't sing whatever song it was. And he was like, usually I would like feel like frustrated or offended or whatever, but the Holy Spirit was working, and he was like, I just asked her, tell me more about that. Like, tell me more about that. And for her, it was connected to a meaningful childhood memory. And it was, connected to like her parents who of course had since passed, and all of this. And it doesn't mean that he should have done the song, but it does diffuse the offense a little bit because we understand where they're coming from. And so that, I think, is an opportunity then, because we made that connection, to then have that conversation that you're talking about, right? Of like, but we did sing a song about salvation in Jesus. It was just the same gospel in a different way. And so when we meet people where they are and care about them as a person, I think that opens up the opportunity for that conversation. And maybe they hear it with different ears and see it with more willing eyes.
Yeah. Well, Andrea, tell us about the Big God books.
Yes. So the Big God Books is a passion project that my husband and I wrote together. It's a children's book series. And, it started because we have seen a lot of the miraculous throughout our lives. And we have seen a lot of answered prayer, a lot of prayers that were answered in a way we didn't expect, and not in necessarily the way we prayed for, but exactly what we needed. And looking back, then we saw like, wow, that really was the miraculous hand of God at work. And so it started out that we just wanted to put it down for our kids and our family. It was like, this is our monument. This is our stake in the ground that we can look back on and say, it doesn't matter what anybody else says. I was there. I know, like I saw it with my own eyes. And so whenever I question if God is there, if God cares, if he hears me, I can look back on this and remember that he does. And so we wanted to give that to our kids and say, hey, this is for you. These are the stories of our life, the things that happened the day God moved the rain. That's what the first book is about. And it's called The Little Church. And it's just about this small yet mighty miraculous thing that we witnessed, where we were doing construction on the church where my husband was pastoring. And it was the day that it couldn't storm because they were setting the rafters and it would have blown them all over, right? And so there, of course, in true summer Minnesota fashion, this big storm rolls in out of nowhere. And we had a big crane. I mean, it would have been catastrophic. And we literally watched it rain all around on the highway and down, and it just did not rain at the church. And it was one of those things that to anybody else, maybe that would seem like no big deal. But to us, it was such the kindness of God. Like, you didn't have to do that. I know we would have been okay, but you did, because you wanted to show us your kindness and your mercy. And so that set us on a journey of writing that down as a monument for our kids. And then as we shared it with people, they were like, you guys, we need this. We need
Sure.
this in print form. And so we got it illustrated and published it, and we wrote 3 more. So it's a series of 4 books, and just really is an opportunity for families to start the conversation about prayer and about miracles, and have that beautiful conversation as a family to say like, hey, one of the books is called A Little Love, and it's basically about a little boy who his best friend moved away, and he was praying for a new friend, and God provided that in a very unexpected way. And it's a real life story of my husband and his aunt, but the illustration is that the families can have a conversation about like, hey, have you ever felt alone like that? right? Like how did God provide, or how can we pray that God provides? And so that's our hope and our prayer with the Big God Book series.
Well, Andrea, with first time guests, we liked our listeners and viewers like to do a thing we do with everybody, and it's called favorite things. So I'm going to give you a word, and you just tell me your favorite thing in that category. Sound good?
Sounds good.
All right. Let's start with, what is your favorite food?
Let's see. I would say dark chocolate.
I will say that as a first after doing this for 4 years. No one has ever said dark chocolate.
I mean, there's so many. I do like food a lot, but if you want like a healthy one, like a meal, I love tacos.
Well, dark chocolate is healthy too. So,
Yeah, true.
do you have a favorite movie?
Let's see. Okay. This I know is super random, but I have always loved the National Treasure movies. It's just like
Yeah.
from early 2000s, Nicolas Cage, like
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why. And they're clean and like just
Yeah.
they don't stress me out, but they're
Right.
interesting.
Yeah. I think they did like a TV show, but it didn't run long at all. Like
Yeah.
recent, like a few years back.
Yes.
But yeah, those are great movies. Do you have a favorite show that you like to watch?
Okay, I do actually. It's an older show. They don't make them anymore, but I really liked White Collar. Do you remember that
Okay.
one?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I do.
I liked White Collar. That's again, it's entertaining, it's funny, it's lighthearted. There's a little bit of action, but it's not really stressful.
Yeah.
I don't prefer to be stressed out
Well,
when
don't
I'm
ever watch
watching shows.
Criminal Minds.
Okay, yeah, no, any of those, like I can't do it.
Too much stress.
Yeah, when my husband and I are gonna watch something, I'm like, so, like, what's the level here? Does anyone like get abducted? Is there torture? Like, I can't deal with it.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite musical artist of all time?
Ooh, that's a good one. You know what? I just have so much love and respect for Carrie Job, and I just I think she's so genuine, and her love for the church and for Jesus and worship. So that's the first one that comes to mind. There's of course countless. I mean, if you want to go all time, I also go back to Michael W. Smith. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
I grew up, singing all the songs, and so I would say if you want to go all time, that's probably where I'd go, but more recent is Gary.
Do you have a favorite ice cream flavor?
Yes, I do. I love cookies and cream. It's a little sad because like I can't
Nice.
do dairy
Oh,
anymore. I'm sensitive to it. I always have been, but more recently in my adult years, I'm like, it's just not worth it. But there's some good dairy-free cookies and
I was
cream.
gonna say they do have dairy-free kinds.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, I've actually, the almond milk like ice creams, they're pretty good.
Yes.
You
Yeah,
know,
they are. I found a
so
cashew milk one recently that was pretty good as well.
nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Do you have a favorite podcast that you listen to?
Okay. Well, I do. So if it's going to be like business podcast, I like the Jenna Kutcher podcast. It's like marketing, digital marketing, that kind of thing. Otherwise, I listen to the Bible recap every day with Tara Lee
Yeah.
Cobble, and I love
Yep.
it.
Yep. We heard from Candace Cameron, and she said that's her favorite, the Bible recap. So I think a
That's
lot of
awesome.
people like that one. So
Yeah.
well, you passed. Congratulations.
Oh, good.
What is next for you, and how can our viewers and listeners keep up with you?
Yeah. Thank you so much. What's next for me is just this growth with Overflow Worship and really focusing on how we can empower the next generation of leaders, of Christian leaders. And so I'm excited that we are building a ton of new content on the Overflow Worship official YouTube channel. And that's been our focus for the end of 2024 and 2025. It's just bringing bold, relatable, fun content from our YouTube channel to our audience to help encourage them on their leadership journey, encourage them in their faith. And so that's what's on the horizon. And also new music. I'm writing new music, and I'm hoping that I can get some of that released in 2025. So you can find us on YouTube at Overflow Worship Official, or just our website website, overflowworship.com. All the socials are Overflow Worship Official. Would love to connect with you.
Nice. Well, to wrap up, I'd like to see if you'd be willing to share something that God's been doing in your life recently that would help build our viewers and our listeners' faith.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have been on a journey of faith for, my whole life, of just leaps of faith, right? I feel like that is something that God has called my husband and I to. And more recently, I feel like God has been showing me that he is constant. And I guess that's what I would want to say, to encourage all the viewers and the listeners to remember that he is constant. He's consistent. He has a perfect track record, and there's no reason not to trust him. And we can't say that about anything else in this world, right? And so actually recently I was writing a song, and I felt like there have been so many times throughout my life, and recently in recent months, where it's like we've been in some really challenging seasons, but as we've come out on the other side, I've seen the kindness of God. I've seen the consistency of God. And I find myself saying, like, God, you didn't have to do that. It was so kind of you to bring us through that. You didn't have to do that. And I find myself like just so desperately wanting people in the world to know and to remember that, because there is a lot of sadness and hopelessness and fear in the world right now with everything that's going on. And I just would encourage you to remember that he is Father, he is faithful, he is friend, he's constant, he is true, he is merciful. And that's the God I know. That's the God I've seen all through my life. And that's the God that you can know too if you don't, or that's who he wants to remind you he is. So that's what I'd leave you with today.
Well, Andrea, thank you so much for sharing your heart and taking the time to chat with me. Overflowworship.com, with the social media handles, Overflow Worship as well, correct?
Overflow Worship Official is all the
Official.
socials.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. And then Andrea Olson, what's your website?
AndreaOlsonMusic.com.
Music.com. Great. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me.
Thank you so much for having me. This was really fun.
Yeah.